Geronimo.
Lethal Company. It's a game. Yep, that's it. Go home, everybody. We did it. All right, enough. So you've booted up Lethal Company a few times now. You watched a couple of guides maybe had a few funny moments with friends, but now you're thinking, these locations are called moons. What the hell are the difference? I wanted to add another note at the beginning of this video. There's a lot of content to cover, so I actually split it up into two. This video is going to be for the strategies and the characteristics of each moon, and the next video on this topic will be more centered around the loot that you get from the moons, so be sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss a moon's loot guide in the future. The major point I can make for moons in general are that there are three categories as the game stands right now for the moons that you can land on. You have the easy moons, which don't cost a dime and don't have a ridiculous amount of danger. The two intermediate moons, which are also free but you might regret going to if you aren't more careful. And well, these three. They suck. They suck hard cock and nuts. And why did I put this in this? As I go forward with this video, I'll also be ranking the moons and the moon weather effects on a tier list from how difficult I think they actually are. Speaking of weather events, each moon can either have clear weather or one of the 5 following weather conditions: rainy, foggy, stormy, flooded, or eclipsed. Rainy moons are not too much of a threat if you know what quicksand is. I'd put these at the easiest to deal with other than normal weather, as I think rainy moons are right around the C mark for how difficult they are. This is because you can for the most part just avoid the quicksand when you know what it looks like. It's kind of just a muddied ground texture. Foggy moons, well, I guess some of these are self-explanatory, but foggy moons make it really hard to literally see anything. If you know a map, cool, that's cool. The map knows you too. By that I mean forest giants, dogs, literally anything that roams around outside at night. You can't fucking see them. So for that reason, I'd go ahead and rank foggy moons on the B tier. Not being able to see anything, even if you know the moons, means not being able to see anything lurking around. Plus, the giants can actually see just as well in fog as they can normally, which is so sick. Stormy moons are one of the more annoying ones, as it is literally Zeus, the god of thunder himself, that strikes you down when you are carrying specific metal objects. You'll hear a little tingle of lightning that you might think, oh, that's probably just my headphones cutting out. This type of moon is especially annoying to me, as sometimes you'll have an item that is constantly being zapped, such as brass bells, and there's not much you can do. I'd rank stormy moons on the list as an A tier because they can just be super annoying, and sometimes it's borderline impossible to get all the way back to the ship with a specific piece of loot because it's being zapped every 5 seconds. Flooded moons are a thalassophobic's worst nightmare. They are similar to a rainy moon, except they have much more water and can be a lot more annoying to traverse, as you have to keep track of the deep pools of water in order to not end up on one of the episodes of that cool show on History Channel I used to watch as a kid, where it's like, they're picking up the crab from the ocean and like, I don't know, it's like deathly catching or something like that. Anyways, I'd rank flooded moons as a B tier, as they're a bit trickier to deal with than rainy moons, but for the most part they aren't impossible as long as you avoid deep pools of water. The absolute worst of the 5 is Eclipsed, which is also self-explanatory if you have survived to the night in this game even once, but if you haven't, well, yeah, this is an S tier. Experimentation is what some people argue is the easiest moon, to which I'd actually agree. As you make your way outside the ship, it's the only moon to only have 2 dangerous enemies roaming around outside at night: the Earth Leviathan, also known as the Worm, and eyeless dogs. There's no giants here, there's no annoying ass baboon hawks making you shit yourself around a corner. The only other thing is bees. It's also one of the 3 moons in the game to have the entrance in your eyesight from where you spawn on the ship, making it super easy to navigate to it. The ladders going up and down near the ledge of the complex make it incredibly easy to avoid enemies and look out for any dogs near the ship. And the fire exit is right on the side of the building up a couple flights of stairs. Experimentation's inside is essentially always the bunker interior, and we'll touch on the other, prettier interior in some later planets, but the inside of every moon's bunker are procedurally generated, so I'll only be covering the enemies inside on this video. The enemies inside Experimentation's bunker, in order of how common they are, which I'll do for the rest of the moons as well, are the bunker spider, the snare flea, the slime, the hoarding bug, the spore lizard, the thumper, the bracken, and apparently the ghost girl. These stats going forward will be according to the Lethal Company unofficial wiki that I've been using for videos in the past, and that I'll be continuing to do so in the future. The best strategy for experimentation, honestly, just try your best to clear it out of all loot. There's a low chance of danger inside the bunker, and outside the bunker, you've got to be really unlucky to not get to the ship in time when the weather is clear before you get got by an eyeless dog. The path is essentially a straight line from the ship to the bunker entrance. What more could you ask for? I'd rank Experimentation as a D. It's definitely the easiest moon in the game. Assurance is what I consider the second easiest moon in the game. While some people might disagree and put Vow here, or even Experimentation, it's the outside enemies for me that make this an easy second place for me. Speaking of those guys, we've got Earth Leviathans, Eyeless Dogs, Baboon Hawks, and Forest Giants, which are all 4 night creatures in the game. But the Forest Giants have a less 1% spawn rate, so you don't really have to worry about them. The pathing of Assurance is a bit less straightforward than the pathing of Experimentation, but it's pretty easy at the same time. There's essentially 4 routes you can take to get into the bunker. The fastest of these routes is shown here, where you can basically completely negate all the bobbing and weaving and just hike up this mountain and then it shoots you straight there. The other 2 routes do involve the bobbing and weaving, but you essentially just go up this mountain instead and can either decide to go left or right at this little fork here. The last route is the fire exit route, where you have to climb all the way up this ladder on the right when you get out of the ship and make this jump onto this pipe before making one last jump onto the fire exit. Assurance's indoor enemies are a bit tougher than Experimentation, consisting of mostly snare fleas, followed by hoarding bugs, then bunker spiders, slimes, thumpers, brackens, and spore lizards. The strategy I'd use on Assurance is taking note of the decent distance between the bunker entrance and the ship when coming back, which you may not be used to if you were running Experimentation before this. Follow a consistent path, but keep in mind as well that you can get cornered very easily because the exit of the bunker shoots you straight into the middle of a couple of mountains, and when you're dealing with eyeless dogs or worms, it can be quite a bit of a hassle. Even with this, I'll go ahead and put Assurance at a solid D tier, but it is just a little bit harder than Experimentation. Vow is, in my opinion, the hardest of the 3 easy moves in the game by far. This is because Earth Leviathans have a higher spawn rate, and Giants essentially have a guaranteed spawn rate on this map, which are essentially the hardest outside enemy, in my opinion, in the game. When you first land and see that lush forest, your path to the entrance is going to be taking a 90-degree turn to the right, avoiding circuit beehives while you walk through the forest towards the entrance. Once you make your way to the ravine, all you have to do is choose whether or not you want to risk going over the metal bridge, or go across the stone bridge to your left, which is a little bit further. You pretty much don't have to worry about the metal bridge unless you bring more than 2 teammates over, or just a lot of really heavy loot. The fire exit to Vow is one of the most straightforward in the game, located at the end of the ravine that you see. Vow's indoor enemies are arguably as dangerous as the outdoor ones, as the bracken has one of the highest spawn rates, followed by hoarding bugs, snare fleas, bunker spiders, slimes, spore lizards, thumpers, and if you're really unlucky, coilheads, but they only have a 2% chance. The strategy I'd use for Vow is to try to secure as much loot as possible before the sun goes down in order to not have to deal with giants very much. When the sun goes down, try your best to listen out for the forest giants' footsteps, as you'll be likely to run into them with their 80% spawn chance. The best way to avoid forest giants is to break line of sight, so use the trees and the dips in the ground in the forest to your advantage. I'd also like to note that you should prepare for a bracken encounter on this moon, as you're about 4 times more likely to see it here than on Experimentation or Assurance. Because of the high chance of the presence of the bracken and the giants, I'm honestly going to put Vow at a B tier in terms of its difficulty. Offense is the first of the 2 intermediate moons in the game right now, and it looks very similar to Assurance. Don't let looks deceive you though, as Offense is nowhere near as easy. It has the same outdoor enemies, but each of them spawn significantly more here at night, so be careful heading back to the ship. Offense has a pretty straightforward path once you get the hang of it, even if it is one of the largest moons in the game. A lot of this area is empty space, but there's 3 ways to get inside on this map. You either make this parkour jump at the edge of this cliff onto this scaffolding as shown, before looping around to the entrance over this bridge thing. Alternatively, you can loop around the mountain on this side here, moving up underneath the bridge thing. The last way in is the fire exit, which technically has 2 entry methods. You can either jump off the ship's railing onto the pipe as you make your way down to the moon, which you've probably seen everywhere at this point, or you can take an extension ladder right here at this corner. If you walk up the mountain a bit, you can go even higher, which typically makes this a bit easier. The indoor enemies of Offense, which you'll notice, get quite a bit tougher here, consisting of a lot of thumpers, after that spiders, slimes, fleas, coilheads, hoarding bugs, lizards, and bracken. The strategy I always find myself using for offense is getting in and out as soon as possible in order to avoid the chance of multiple coilheads spawning, which is really tough to deal with, especially on an early year moon like this. The outside always gets a bit quirky at night, so be cautious when you come back to the ship and utilize the scaffolding in order to see any dangers over the ship before you make your way down. Also, don't sleep on the fire exit on this map, even though it seems inaccessible. Either learn that jump strat and use it, or bring an extension ladder to offense. It makes it so much easier. I'll rank offense as a B tier because in my opinion, not having to deal with brackens or giants is a blessing in disguise, even if coilheads are common, but the thumpers on this map can be a bit much sometimes. January, February, March, April, May, June. I fucking hate this moon. March is the second intermediate tier moon in the game, and it's very similar to Val from earlier. You'll notice as soon as you get in that there's a big lake right in front of you, and on the other side is the entrance to the bunker, making this another moon where you can see right off the gate where the entrance is. While this may seem nice, the two paths around this lake to get to the bunker are either constantly riddled with bees, or just too small to run away from the nighttime creatures such as baboon hawks, giants, and dogs. There are three main paths on March, and they're all easy as hell and straightforward. There's two ways to loop around the lake, and if you make your way down to the back corner here, you'll get to the fire exit. March has a plethora of, well, fun enemies inside those doors. We have thumpers starting us off with a slightly less spawn chance than offense, followed by spiders, brackens, snare fleas, hoarding bugs, slimes, and coilheads. The reason that I don't like this moon is that every hard enemy is relatively consistent in their spawns on this map from what I find, even with some of the lower numbers I listed before. Having to deal with both forest giants and eyeless dogs at the same time in such a small amount of space around the ship isn't my favorite thing in the world, so just move slow or fast depending on which one you're dealing with. I'll go ahead and rank March at an A tier, because dealing with a bee, dog, and giant combo outside isn't great, and also dealing with a bracken and thumper combo inside is arguably worse. Rend is the first of the three difficult moons in the game, and it's the first moon that's completely different from the others in terms of its environment, which you'll notice immediately with that blast of frosty air running straight into the ship and down your widow's spiny whiny. The other things you'll rarely be able to see through the fog are the lights that lead to the entrance, trees, and a little shack to the left of the main path. You won't have to worry about circuit bees here, but later in the night you'll see dogs, giants, and worms. Rend's pathing is actually pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it, even if it seems like you're going to get lost when you first land. All you have to do is follow the lights for a while until they hit the wall of the complex, and then you can just follow the wall all the way to the main entrance. To get to the fire exit, however, you're going to want to hook 45 degrees right off of the path, right around the 7th light. Once you see this dip in the ground, follow it to the right and it'll lead you right to the fire exit, which is pretty obscured. Rend is the first moon with the manor as its inside layout. The manor is typically home to some of the best loot you'll find in the game, and some of the worst enemies as well. The manor on Rend is home to mostly coilheads, jesters, and brackens. Woohoo! Fun as fuck. It also has spiders, hoarding bugs, snare fleas, ghost girls, and slimes. You don't have to worry about thumpers here, but goddamn, ghost girls, jesters, and coilheads spawn a lot here, more than any other moon in the game. The strategy I use for Rend is honestly to keep note of where the entrance to the manor is and use the height of the balconies above to your advantage. You put a lot of distance between yourself and the wildlife within the manor just by utilizing the main lobby and any balconies you see. This actually goes for Dine as well. Another tip I'll go ahead and add is the fact that Rend's indoor area is harder than Dine's, and Dine's outside area is harder than Rend's, just as a rule of thumb. So tread with caution in the manor here and get used to seeing a lot of coilheads, ghost girls, and jesters. I'd rank Rend as an S tier for difficulty, as I think it's overall the second hardest moon in the game aside from Titan, which we'll get to in a bit. The reason for this? The coilhead and bracken combo. It's arguably the worst combo to deal with in the game. Also, the ghost girls and jesters are just... oh god. Dine, to me, is just an easier version of Rend with more loot. You land on the moon and may notice the fact that it shares basically every similarity to Rend in terms of its environment. That's why I'm making a lot of comparisons here. But the main two differences you'll notice are that the paths of lights are a little bit further, and the presence of more monsters at night, which I mentioned before. The main difference between Rend and Dine in terms of outside creatures is that Dine has more worms and Rend has more giants. But Dine still has a fair amount of giants for you to deal with too, which can be a pain in the ass. Dine also commonly has the manor as its indoor layout, and this manor has a more well-rounded amount of lethal company. See what I did there? This list starts off with the jester, then the spider, coilhead, snare flea, hoarding bug, and then the thumper's back, followed by the slime, the bracken, the ghost girl, and lizards if you're lucky. This is the first moon on the list with every indoor enemy present, so try to be careful in that sense. The strategy I'd use for Dine is essentially the same as Rend's, where you use the mana to your advantage, but there's one key difference here. I've mentioned this before, but on Dine I noticed that outside is a lot harder to deal with at night because of the yucky combo of dogs and worms, so try your best to get as much loot as early as possible to risk less profit in case something goes wrong on the later half of the day. Also, you don't really have to follow the lights here, as you can loop around this little ice mound in the center and get a straight shot straight back to the bunker entrance or the ship. Once you get the hang of this, traversing Dine is a lot easier than traversing Rend. I'll go ahead and rank Dine as an A, even though there are so many enemies present here that you have to deal with, because each one has a relatively low spawn chance, which means you're more likely to run into a variety of enemies, and less likely to run into 3 coilheads and a jester. Oh yes, God, Titan. This moon is absolutely everywhere on YouTube right now. It's hard to really cover the outside area on Titan because it's absolutely the most straightforward out of any map in the game, even with the low visibility. You can see if you look out the ship when you're first landing that the entrance is quite literally 2 steps away. Just walk up this set of stairs, climb on the ladder, and you're all set. The fire exit is also right in the front, not even tucked away like it is on Experimentation. The outside of Titan isn't too bad either considering the short distance. You just have to really worry about eyeless dogs, as their spawn rate here is the largest out of any moon in the game, which often results in them spawning early. With low visibility, even with the short distance, this can be a pain. The inside of Titan is the only hard moon in the game with a normal bunker layout. The bunker on Titan is the second planet with every enemy in the game roaming around, and the spawn rates are a bit different from Dine's. The enemies you'll face here are jesters, brackens, spiders, coilheads, snare fleas, thumpers, hoarding bugs, ghost girls, slimes, and the occasional lizard or two. The only strategy that I would use differently for Titan versus the other moons is to remember that loot can be dropped vertically off the ledge of stairs to make getting back to the ship a much more streamlined process. In terms of how to traverse the bunker, I'd recommend using railings to your advantage when possible, and to bring the zap gun if you have the money for it, as the jester has a pretty high spawn rate here, which can be important if you're deep inside Titan because you can delay the jester's timer with the zap gun. Also, bring a radar booster or a boombox in order to make finding the entrance easy, because you will run into the jester here more often than not, and being able to reset that timer by leaving the bunker for 5 seconds is a must. The most important thing to keep in mind on Titan is that the bunker is much harder to navigate in my opinion than the manor because of things like smoke and beam jumps. I'd say Titan is an easy S tier and is the definitive hardest moon in the game. This is because of 2 main factors. The fact that the manor is much easier to explore than the bunker, and the goddamn Brian Griffins waiting for you outside when you get out. That's essentially everything I wanted to talk about in this video. I know it was a longer one than usual as there was a lot to cover, but if you guys want to see me rank all of the moons based on the loot that you get, be sure to subscribe for notifications and leave a comment telling me how excited you are for that, because it's already in the works. Also, I wanted to throw a big, huge warm thank you to all the support you guys have been giving me. It's crazy how much it's blowing up, and it means the absolute world. Yeah, that's the end.